Assalamu alaikum, believers. Welcome to this Sunday's Ta'aleem. On behalf of Imam Tariq El-Amin, resident Imam of Masjid Al-Taqwa, the Ta'aleem Committee Chair, Dr. Aisha El-Amin, the committee members, Dr. Lionel Allen Jr., Rashida Fitzpatrick, and Dr. Gloria Bashir, I want to welcome you to today's Ta'aleem. Today's topic is autism community support. And we welcome our presenter, Brandi Okowokere. Did I pronounce it correctly?
You got really close. Carrie.
Autism, please forgive me. Autism. There will be time at the end of our presentation for questions and answers. Please feel free to use the raise hand function or submit questions or comments in the chat. Also, Taqwa family, please mute yourself if you are not speaking to help avoid background noise. Before we begin, please note that today's Ta'aleem, as well as all past and future Ta'aleems and cookbars, are available on the Masjid Al-Taqwa YouTube channel. If you're not already, please subscribe. So we'll open up today with the Al-Fatiha. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Amin. The floor is yours.
Um, Greetings. I'm Brandi Okowokere. I'm a board certified and licensed behavior analyst. I hold masters in education and psychology with an emphasis in applied behavior analysis. I've been working with children in mental health since 2011. I was the first school-based board certified behavior analyst hired for DC Public Schools in 2017. And more recently, I developed an ABA company in Northern Virginia called Behavior B. And that is what I'll be presenting information about Behavior B and autism and how we can be supportive as a community. One of the main things with Behavior B is we want to promote growth and development. We offer a scientific and individual approach to servicing children diagnosed with autism. Using ABA principles, we develop a comprehensive treatment plan to support your child's growth and independence. We create programs to strengthen communication, interpersonal, social, and independence for activities of daily living. At the same time, the treatment plan is designed to reduce maladaptive and disruptive behaviors. At Behavior B, we believe all children have the capacity to interact positively and independently within their environment. Just as a disclaimer, this program is designed for children from ages 2 to 22, so most of the presentation will be catered for that age group. What is autism? I mean, I'm sure we have all been impacted, whether it's a family member or a friend or a friend's child. Somewhere in our community, we have come in contacts with someone with ASD. It is a complex, lifelong neurological and developmental condition that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. One quote that I keep with me is, if you know one person, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Everybody, just like you and I, have different things about us. So no autistic person is the same. Just like no one human is exactly the same. Even if they're identical twins, they're not going to be the same exact people. So just keeping that in mind as we go through this presentation and some of the ways of us being supportive that is going to be unique to individuals. So how can we help? Applied behavior analysis. So applied behavior analysis, also known as ABA, and I'll be referring to it as ABA throughout the rest of the presentation. It's a therapy based on science, the science of learning and behavior. Behavior analysis helps us to understand how behavior works, help us understand how the behavior is affected by our environment, how learning takes place in general. ABA therapy applies to our understanding of how behavior works in real life situations. The goal is to increase behaviors that are helpful and decrease behaviors that are harmful or affect learning. And from my clinical perspective, everyone benefits from applied behavior analysis in some form. We are all looking to optimize our functioning in our environment. So ABA can be helpful across the board, not just with autism. So I like to point that out as well. What does autism affect? So today, the way that I have this presentation set up is that these are our main domains that we support: maladaptive and disruptive behaviors, communication, social skills, and independent living skills. So we'll go through each one of these topics with a description of how we support and a practical example of of things that you can do to actually in the real life to see that can be supportive. So we're going to start off with reduction of problematic behavior. Behavior B's scientific approach identifies the underlying causes for engagement in problematic behaviors. Identifying these causes provides us with the foundation to develop interventions that are designed to reduce these behaviors. We create strategies that create replacement behaviors for those maladaptive behaviors that we want to reduce by increasing functional communication and overall appropriate engagement within their environment. Throughout this process, we're working with caregivers, parents, and staff members, that could be teachers and therapists, to ensure that everyone's working towards the same goal. Because all of our learners are going to be different, their families are different, and their families have different needs. So it's very important for us to identify what the family deems as socially significant, so that, again, that we're all working towards the same goal. One practical example for reducing behavior would be a coin system. And I have these little things with me so I can make it real for you guys. So this is an example of a coin system. It's just coins in a bag. The learner will earn 1 coin for completion of a program, or for maintaining appropriate behavior for a specified time frame. So the coins would be delivered after, let's say, 10 minutes of appropriate behavior, you can earn a coin. Or if you complete a program, if you complete a task, you can earn a coin for that. And at the end of the session, you will change these coins for a reward. So you would have, like, for example, 5 coins equal 5 minutes of iPad time, or 10 coins can equal a small candy bar. These rewards are all based on the learner's preferences and the family's desire to give whatever that it has to match up. So you're not just randomly picking rewards, you're making sure that it aligns with the family's desires and along with the preferences of the learner. Our next topic is improving communication skills. All behavior is a form of communication. And I know sometimes that's hard for us to understand. Even those behaviors we don't want to see, they are still a form of communication. And because all behavior is a form of communication, we have to first identify, what is the learner trying to communicate with us? And we have to, understanding what the learner is communicating ensures that we develop the most appropriate ways to get those needs met. At Behavior B, we create interventions that increase functional communication to replace those inappropriate forms of communication. Maybe an appropriate form of communication might be pulling your hair to get your attention. Well, we wouldn't want you to be pulling hair. We would want you to maybe tap on the shoulder, or maybe wave, or say, can I get help? Or just anything that is a little bit more appropriate to get those needs met. Appropriate communication skills are a gateway to improving the learner's functional engagement within their environment. So this is pretty much the foundation of reducing all of those maladaptive behaviors we just previously discussed. So a practical example to expand upon a learner's communication skills would be tacting. Tacting is the skill of labeling. So you would have cards like this, tacting cards, and this will support the learner's increase in their vocabulary. So the facilitator would present the card, what is it? And then the learner would answer apples. And then once the learner answered that question, they would receive either a reward or verbal praise. And that reward, we can circle back to the coin system and say, hey, thanks for telling me what that is. Here's a coin. So as we go through this presentation, I'm going to try to tie it all together for you all. Hope that makes sense. So our next topic is improving social skills. Socialization can be difficult for most individuals, but especially difficult for those with autism. And at Behavior B, we try to identify special interests used to develop the interventions. The importance of identifying a special interest is if you don't identify a special interest, then you are not really creating an environment that the child would be in a preferable mode. So it's important that you don't just pick random things that you might find enjoyable, but you really dig deep to see what is important to that learner and what kind of interest they have. Because once you do that, we can create interventions that increase the learner's ability to appropriately socialize with family members, friends, and peers. Social skills are including greetings of others, joint attention to activity, identifying emotions, appropriately engaging within the community, and understanding basic social rules. Appropriate socialization supports the learner's ability to functionally engage within their environment. This is important, and you'll hear this theme throughout the presentation, is if we can create and teach skills to help them engage within their environment, it makes the situation so much less intense for everyone. So it's important to have these greetings and joint attention and identifying others' emotions. Those are all foundational skills to support communication within their community. So our practical example for this is a program called cooperative play, and you can also think of it as a turn-taking activity. So this will support the learner's ability to engage in turn-taking activities without engaging in any disruptive behaviors. So some of those things that you might that might be interesting are like Monopoly. So you can ask for tic-tac-toe, or even something simple as checkers. So you can have, based on your observations of the learner, decide, oh, I always notice that this learner enjoys moving pieces around a board. That's a baseline skill for something like Monopoly. So based on what those interests are, you want to stay focused on their interests. You would select an activity that they will be willing to engage with. The facilitator will present the learner with instructions to any of those games, and then the direction of let's play. You want to set a timer, and once that timer goes off, you will provide a reward for engaging in the game for that specified amount of time. And the main goal with this is not that they win or lose, but that they engage in this activity without disruptive behaviors. Throughout the theme of these programs, the biggest thing you want to look at is making sure that the learner is not engaging in those disruptive behaviors for longer periods of time. Because as they go longer without engaging in those maladaptive behaviors, you've gotten it to a point where they're engaging in more functional, appropriate behavior. So that is one of the foundational reasons we would do a program like this. Our next one is increasing independence for daily living skills. Independence with daily living skills is vital for transitioning into a functional life. At Behavior B, we assess the learner's needs from the beginning. Like we might take a survey on hand washing, independence in the bathroom, independence with dressing, eating, all of those things that you have to be able to do independently. We would make that we would go through that assessment, identify where we have deficits, and then we would create a comprehensive plan to teach the required skills. In addition to teaching the skills and teaching daily living skills, we kind of expand that to organizational skills, cleaning, and preparation of meals. This organizational piece is really important because from my experience, when you're able to have a learner organize their environment, that cuts down on a lot of stress of trying to navigate and find things because it's in an organized, a structured way. And that again includes cleaning, transitioning from different locations. All of those skills are required for independent living. Appropriate life skills support the learner's ability to functionally engage within their environment with minimal support. So the practical example for this is hand washing. And the program would be very easy. You would just create a hand washing routine, turn on the water, all the things you would need to do to wash your hands. And the learner will complete that routine. And each one of those routines would act as one trial. So I'm going to pause here because I've given a lot of information. And then the second part of this is more of what you can do at home. So I want to give an opportunity to answer any questions about the information that was just presented or any comments or just anything regarding what we've just presented.
One of the things that I wanted to note with the last thing that you presented is a lot of times when teaching the skill sets that you were just talking about as far as hand washing, would pictures help a lot?
Absolutely. So generally what you would see is maybe a visual of the directions written on one side. I'm sorry, guys, I wish I had one with me, but you would have like a visual of each step, turning on the water, putting your hands underwater, then taking them back, putting the soap on, putting them hands back underwater. So you can create small pictures with all of these and you can post them in the bathroom so that you're not only showing a visual of it, but you're also giving them some independence because they can just look at the picture and they don't need anyone there to say like, okay, turn on the water. They can see the picture. So the visual support you just talked about is so important because as you teach a skill, you always want to get to the point where the skill can be done independent of you. And the best way to do that is visual support.
We have a question, just not necessarily for children with autism, but just children in general. What would be a good age to start working with your child? Using
Um,
the same ABA, because as you mentioned, ABA can be used for everyone, not just children with autism.
Yes, and I love this question because that to me I think ABA works for me. I create a structured environment for myself. But for your question, I believe 2 is a nice age to start setting some routines in place. And the reason I say 2 is because by 2, they are exploring all over. I mean, if you've seen a 2-year-old, you know they're all over, they're touching things, they want to know what to do. So at that age, if you can create a structure of these skill sets that you want to teach, they are sucking it up like a sponge. So if you have, let's say, even if you want to do something as simple as sorting, I'm sure you've all seen the sorting activities. You can have them sort their own laundry in a sense. The blue shirts go here, the white shirts go there. That is ABA, and that is functional because eventually you would want to teach them that dark clothes and light clothes need to be separated in order to wash them. And it might sound absurd to think about a 2-year-old learning that skill, but it's actually so helpful as they develop, you're creating a foundation. And simple things, like I said, sorting is the most simple example I can think of. But even when we talked about tacting items, apples, kids are eating, right? So you want them to be able to say, what is this? This is an apple. You want them to know, even if they are not at a point where they can completely pronounce the words clearly. If they're just giving you, you can expand upon that. And as we call that shaping. So if you have that approximation, that S sound, then you would just finish it apple. And eventually that child is going to model that behavior from you. And next thing you know, they're going to be like, I want an apple. And so not only do you have them identifying apple, you have them requesting apple.
We have
So
a hand raised.
yes, I don't know how to
No, no, I'm just acknowledging. Um, Dr. El-Amin, you had a question?
Yes. Can you talk to us a little bit about how do we make an environment, a community center, more accessible and more adaptive to the various needs that come in?
Yes, the best way to do that is to take a moment, and when I say a moment, maybe an hour, to do some observation and even a short interview with the parents to gather information about the child's desire, like enjoyment preferences. Because once you gather those preferences, you can create a structured environment with using those preferences as a reward. So let's say I have a child that really likes Big Bird. I wouldn't know this unless I do some kind of have some kind of interview conversation with the parent or caregiver. So we identify Big Bird. This child would do anything to get access to Big Bird. So I'm going to structure all of his rewards around, okay, so we sit down and we can say 3 letters, you get access to Big Bird. If you can, go and finish your hand wrestling routine, you get access to Big Bird. So it is more of structuring each activity and making sure you have that reinforcer for the behavior to continue. And one thing I like to think about with outside of autism, we all do things and we are reinforced for our behavior. I am being reinforced right now by talking because you all are asking questions. So my behavior of talking is reinforced by by your talking. So there's not one behavior that we do that we aren't reinforced for. Even if it's as simple as scratching our arm, you're reinforced by scratching your arm because it feels better. You're reinforced by eating because you feel full. So when you think about structuring an environment, you always want to think about what is this child desire and how can I structure it in a way that we both get what we want. So they're not just getting access to Big Bird, they're also complying with what I need them to do in order to get access. Did that answer the question?
I believe so, sweetheart. I have another application of what you were saying. Even when in raising children, I know I grew up not necessarily with toys, but using toys as a way of finding out what your child's interests are and therefore getting them to work for it. Do you think, at what age do you think that would be an appropriate approach?
I think the thing with toys, depending on the age, because I 2 is my number to start everything, right? Because they're so exploratory at that age. So they're not typically you have 2-year-olds that go from one toy to another very quickly, right? They might look at it, throw it around, and be on to the next toy. So this is the best time to figure out, okay, my kid is really liking stuff that has buttons on it. Okay, they don't touch with it, mess with anything else but the toys that have buttons. Well, now I've just identified as a parent, if I really want them to start working on, maybe pulling their shirt up themselves, I can use this toy to encourage them to pull their shirt up or with the dressing routine. Because all of these things, the earlier you start with independence, the better off they're going to be as they get older because it becomes less challenging. And again, I'm speaking for all kids, not because I've worked in many settings, not just with kids with special needs. All of the kids that I've worked with benefit from this kind of structure where you're identifying a preference and using that preference to move forward. I see a hand this time.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, please, with your question. Basima?
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum.
So my question is, if I can put it so you can understand it. So now I understand what you were saying about using certain things that they like as, okay, when you do this, you get rewarded by something that you might like. So what is your opinion or view if you use that, say, for instance, if something they did bad or wrong, and then you say, okay, now you can't have what you like. Is that kind of like a bad approach because like maybe they'll get to the point that they won't like that and you're starting a square one? So in other words, can you use that same item or approach in the opposite direction, or is that more of a negative way of getting,
That's a really good question because it can bite you in the butt, right? If you do that too soon. And when I mean too soon is you haven't let's talk about ages. So 2 to 5, that is really risky because they might not care about it anymore, right? If you take it away from them, they haven't got enough attachment to it to care that much. And what that also tells you is if you take it away and they don't care, then that motivator is not strong enough. So yes, that can happen, but if that does happen, then you just learned 2 things. You haven't failed, you've learned that one, this motivator isn't strong enough, and 2, I need to find something else that is just as strong. But what you're describing is what we would call, and when I use this term punishment, it is not in a negative connotation, it's a clinical term. Punishment just means you remove something to decrease the behavior from happening. So it's not corporal, it's not in a negative connotation. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
So you're just using it to say like, okay, right now, if you're not following these directions, then you're not going to have access to this iPad. And I use the iPad because you really can't go wrong with the iPad these days because they love them so much and there's so many different items within one item that would probably be a really strong device that you can use this with. And I think that we use that all the time, and I think it's very appropriate. The only thing you want to make sure of is when you're doing that, you have provided that expectation on the front end. So you're not just frustrated like, okay, so you didn't listen for 10 minutes, so now I'm taking your iPad. No, you would have, from my clinical perspective, you would have needed to give a verbal direction. Okay, I need you to do this. And then if it's not done in 10 minutes, I'm going to remove your iPad until it's done. So using that type of language on the front end of it, to me, from a clinical standpoint, that prevents it from getting too emotional, right? That keeps things very concrete. This is the expectation, and you didn't meet that expectation, and this is the consequence for not meeting that expectation. And then once you do that, you have to follow through whatever those directions are. You want to make sure you follow through with that so that the learner knows that this is what happens. And then that becomes ingrained in them, and that becomes a behavior pattern. So they will understand that I get access to my iPad when I'm being appropriate, when I'm following directions. Again, it's not, because sometimes people think about this as bartering or bribing a child, and it's not that, because we don't go to work without a paycheck. We don't drink water without feeling good. Like every behavior we have, from the most simple behavior to the most complex behavior, is being reinforced. So with the learner or child, they're designed the same way we are. So you just want to keep that in mind and do it. To answer your question, make sure I'm answering your question on the front end of things. Make sure that expectation is set prior to you delivering a consequence.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know I have found as a parent for the second time around that um setting those clear expectations and letting them know what the response is going to be if those expectations are not met makes for a very clear cut parenting, because it's not wishy-washy and it's not because I'm tired now, so now I'm going to let you do it. That's the real I think conundrum is when a parent is tired and they just give in, because that's when ABA can be undone. Is that correct?
Yes, and we all have emotional exhaustion, but one thing I have learned with working with parents is if they establish the parents and caregivers, if you establish these routines and structures, it is hard in the front end, but you're allowed to be tired on the back end of it because its structure is set. And even if it takes, let's just say 6 months to get your structure set, the next 10 years will be easy in a sense, right? Because you have this foundation set. So they know if they didn't make their bed and they come home and their iPad is missing, they already know. It's not much questions to ask. You didn't make your bed. You don't have iPad when you come home. But if you just take their iPad and you have never been consistent with this demand of making their bed, you're going to end up with all sorts of attitude and tantrums and anger and frustration and confusion because you didn't have that consistency. And I know as a parent, as a caregiver, as a teacher, it is hard. We get exhausted. They will push every single button. But my best work is when I have been able to, because some situations that you don't have no time or no energy, it's just impossible to set up that good structure. But when I have been able to set up a good structure and a good plan, the school year goes so much easier. The session time goes so much easier after it's already set.
Yes.
So the next part of this presentation is really geared towards teachers and caregivers and parents, because I want you all to go home with something saying like, this is what I can do today, or, so that is what the next part of this presentation is. Parent caregiver education. Parental and caregiver involvement is vital. We cannot do anything of what we do without it. And in applied behavior analysis, one of our fundamental dimensions is social significance. Without social significance, none of the programs I design matter. And when I say social significance, that is the parent, the caregiver. You are the one that decides, okay, let's say we have a behavior of clapping or stimming. That's what some kids with autism do. I've had parents that say, we don't want them to do that. We need to eradicate that behavior. Fine. And I have other parents that are fine with it. It is not my decision whether we are going to get rid of clapping or not. That is completely up to the parent to decide what we're working on and what we're not working on. If you want to work on twirling, we will work on that. If you don't, we will not. So just for anyone that is going to be interested in getting services or working in this field, just know that your parents, your caregivers, those are the leaders of your, so to speak, team, and you're following their directions all the way down. And the reason that this is so vital is because if they don't buy in, if it is not their plan, getting them to agree to your plan is going to not happen. No one will do things that they don't feel like are genuinely beneficial. And people have a hard time finding the benefit in things that they were not a part of developing. So understanding that the caregiver role is essential into what we do, it is the most important part. And once you have a parent that is really committed to this process, it will reduce the stress level for everyone in your home. I always tell families when I meet them, ABA is not an individual therapy. It is a family therapy, because it is not just one parent that is going to change and the child is going to change. The whole house is going to start responding differently and making changes. And that is how that child is going to make changes. And one example is, I'll go back to hair pulling. If every day Johnny pulls my hair because he's thirsty, he's pulling my hair, he's pulling dad's hair. This is his way of communicating he wants water. Well, everybody has to stop responding to that. Not just mom, dad, sister, cousin. Everyone has to stop responding to that and start responding in an agreed way. Okay, when Johnny pulls my hair, I'm going to say, you can tap, you can do this. This is another behavior. And I will get you water. But that can, if only one person does that, that will not be successful for Johnny across the board. So it's just, I give that example because it's really important for everyone to understand the impact of parental and caregiver support, and that they are the ones that are going to make sure that this therapy is successful and everybody's enjoyed it. So one practical example that I'm going to go through, and this is kind of the take home, is an autism toolbox. So I created this practical resource for teachers, therapists, and parents to provide a variety of tools. I've shown you a few of them, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of them, and then kind of show you how you can use them in your everyday life. So overall, the toolbox is a valuable resource for anyone working with autistic children 2 and up, providing them with the tools they need to succeed and to thrive and succeed in social and educational environments. Before we go into each one of these, if you are working with the BCBA, their rules supersede anything I say today because they are the ones that know who you're working with. So this is only my limited information as a presentation. So the first tool bag, and then I'll have time for questions, a lot of time for questions after I go through this. So our first toolbox is 2 to 5, because 2-year-olds and 6-year-olds are very different, but this 2 to 5 age have a lot of similarities. So I was able to gather activities that work for this age group. So the first thing that you get in this, and it's a bag, all of these things come in a bag like this. A clear bag so you can see what's going on. You don't have to like shuffle through a dark bag. So first you get a program guide, and this program guide breaks down all of the behavior, all of the programs that you need, and it also comes with a glossary. Comes with directions, and is laminated real thick so that if water spills, it's super handy. So you get your program guide. And then you have programs for attending. So for attending, if you're trying to get a child to be able to sit a little bit longer, we would call that an attending skill. It's not necessarily that you need them to complete an activity. You just want them to be able to sit for maybe 5 to 10 minutes without disruption or without any maladaptive behaviors. So you can start off with a coloring book, and you can start off with 5 seconds. We're just going to sit, hold this for 5 seconds and just color. And you can increase it up to 10 minutes if you want to. But you're going to base that timing off of where that child is currently at. Like I've had children that can't sit for longer than 30 seconds. So we're starting at 20 seconds. And we're just increasing based off of that. So that would be what the coloring book would be used for. And if they're not quite ready to hold a pen or a marker, then you would just use a simple reading book. And maybe, like I said, you might be starting with 2 words, 3 words. You can start with just showing them the cover, and that could be 10 seconds. So just keeping in mind that it doesn't have to be a long duration. You're working up to that. And then the next part of the bag is all communication. So I mentioned earlier tacting. Tacting is just another word for labeling. So the more that a child can label things, the larger their vocabulary would be, and the better they're able to communicate. So we have tact and shapes, numbers, letters. And one of my favorites is functional words. I like functional words because words are A vocabulary is everything. And the more words you can give them, the more access to the environment that they're going to have. So the words is one of my favorites. And then I throw in tact and colors. The next thing they have is a fine motor. A fine motor activity. So this is zipping, buttoning, any of those kinds of activities, clipping things together, just a variety of fine motor skills activities. And all of this, like I showed you earlier, comes in a bag, and you can use these activities, and they're all laminated with very thick plastic so that my goal with designing this is that the bag would be able to be used for up to 6 to 8 months. So this is what everything looks like broken down. But yeah, the goal is for the bag to be usable so that you wouldn't need more than 2 bags per year. That was the overall goal of that. So next we're going to go into the 6 and up bag. So the 6 and up bag also comes with a very thick program guide that breaks all the definitions down and all the programs down. And we start off with the cooperative play, which we discussed a little bit earlier. And it's important, as we discussed earlier, with cooperative play, you're choosing activities that they have somewhat of an interest to. So that they are more willing to engage. So you can do Monopoly is a little bit long, but that's an option. And then we have tic-tac-toe, and then we have checkers. So with each bag, you get 3 different cooperative play activities so that, like I said, they'll have some choices. I'm sorry, did anyone have a question?
I had a question about the bag before. What kind of functional terms did you have in there?
Oh, so functional words, I can pull a few out. Sorry, So a few functional words would be like say, what, where. So just real basic words that feet, that you would need the number 5. These are just words that connector words that just increase your ability to understand the environment you're in.
And can you use those also as just take the word out and then just have a conversation about just that one word? Like, what do you have 5 of? Or can you name 5 things? Is that another way of like expounding upon just that word so that they can see the functionality of it?
Yes. However, if you're starting out with just tacting, this is just tacting.
Okay.
So that which you just described is a addition to this program. So if we have 5 words and they've mastered those 5 words at 100% accuracy, yes, then it would be very appropriate to take those words and expand upon them by asking WH questions. But WH questions, that is a second layer once you have mastered this simple labeling. So a lot of times you want kids to have about 100 words, right? An average of about 100 words. And typically once they have those 100 words, then you can start introducing those WH receptive questions. And that works really well, because the issue is if you start asking questions prior to them having this base of words, they won't be able to answer you, and you're going to create a lot of frustration. And if you're seeing frustration, a lot of times it's because you need to take a little bit of a step back and give some more foundational skills. This has never been wrong for me. Anytime I bring out a program and a child starts having behaviors, it's because they're not there yet. And even if it means they need to practice a little bit more, that's one option. But the more likely option is you need to take a step back and do an easier program so that you've made sure you've mastered it. A lot of times we master things out at 80%, but there are some goals that you need to take all the way to 100% so that when you get to that next tougher goal, you know they have it and you won't see those behaviors. because we have to remember all behaviors are communication. It's communication, I don't want to do this. It's communication, I don't like this. This is hard. This is stupid. All those things that they think, that is what those behaviors are communicating. So you want to pay attention to that. You want to analyze that. And if you need to, it is okay to take a step back.
I got another hand up. Yes, Basima?
I saw there was a question in the chat about what age, but my question ties into that also. And regarding also what you just said, as far as when the child is acting out, you got to take a step back. So my question is, what do you know? I mean, I know there's probably, I'm sure, observations and assessments to determine if a child is autistic.
Absolutely.
And kind of like asthma, you know, when you go to the doctor, you'll determine, okay, you're exercise asthma and this asthma. They have all kind of. So the word that I'm hearing a lot is spectrum, or
Yes.
autistic spectrum. So how do you know when you observing a child, say, in preschool, and they're having tantrums, or, you know, like you said, behavior, what you might see as behavioral issue, but the problem is actually they've gotten school, they're used to being at home, you know, getting their way. When they have this tantrum, that it's not misdiagnosed, and basically, excuse me for lack of a better word, they just need some old school.
Oh, so your question is about overdiagnosing.
Or basically, like I said, maybe they're not necessarily autistic, but the things like you say, they're having behavior issues. Instead of asking for what they want, they hit little Johnny, because they used to doing that for the last 4.5 years at home. So now they're out with other children. You know what I'm saying? And it's
I know exactly.
Okay, they don't need, you know, a tool bag. Maybe they just need, you know, sit in the corner, or some other old school methods that, you know, older people may have used.
So one thing I'll say about that is, yes, that there's two different things. And I guess it's been about 15 years, so I can tell the difference between some, I'm just going to call it minor behavior concerns compared to autism. Those are different. They look different. And the main way I can tell that they look different is it's the communication piece. So, for example, if I have a child that is displaying like you said, some mild behavior concerns, and they're coming from, and I've talked to the parents, so I know this is how they're interacting at home, and I know at home this is what's working for them, then I know, okay, we need to talk to the parents, because there's not anything you're really going to be able to do at a center that if they don't do it at home, it's going to help you, right? So you can spend 5 hours, 6 hours in a center, and you do all the stuff that you're supposed to do, and then they go home, they back to hitting to get the water. That's a problem. So for me, it's best to have that conversation with the parents, like, this is what we're seeing. You're seeing it too. So this is what you need to do when you see it. So giving the parents some of that education and guidance. So instead of him hitting you, have him touch your hand, or whatever replacement behavior you deem appropriate. Giving that parent that education piece, that to me is what makes a difference when you have a child that's you're more so just dealing with behavioral issues. Now, autism, the main thing is when you end up in a situation where the communication is not there, and even when you have done all of, let's say you removed like these preferred things, and or they have access to all these preferred things, and they're still in this tantrum kind of behavior, and it takes, let's say, twice as long to get them out compared to a child that does not have autism, then I start looking and saying, okay, there might be some things that environmentally we need to strengthen, because both kids need stronger environmental support, right? No matter what, both kids need a little bit more structure to be successful. It's just that your kid with autism is going to need twice as that support compared to your kid that doesn't have that diagnosis. So the best thing I can say is you kind of can use the same approaches with the structure, because I'll tell you this, if you put structure on a kid that doesn't have autism, they're going to thrive. They're just gonna, it's going to happen in such an organic way that structure, they'll start creating it independently on their own. Now, the kid that has autism, it's going to take a lot longer for them to start developing and modeling on their own, but they'll do it too. So these procedures that I'm talking about and these programs, they can be beneficial across the board. And I fundamentally believe that, because I've worked in all of the settings with different developmental issues. I hope that kind of answers.
That's a very good point. No, that's a very good point, because
Yeah, it did.
one of the things that we, you know, I've been in the classroom for 20 plus years, and I have learned that different approaches are going to be required to deal with our populations.
In other words, would it be correct in saying some of your students are spoiled and some are not? That's what my point was. A child is spoiled as opposed to a child.
You can have, yes, yes, and it's hard for me to say that, because I've had kids that have autism that are spoiled too, right? And so it's hard because and the autism is clear as day, but the spoiledness is clear as day too. I'm like, but you know how to ask for that. I've watched you ask for that. So it's almost, I go back to the parent guidance, is if everybody is not doing it the same way, they will figure out who's not doing it. Right. So if every time I cry, mom gives me a lollipop, I'm crying. I'm not asking, I'm just crying because I know that works. But then we have, Miss Rashida over here. I cry. She asks me, what do I want? Then I tell her. So every time, I go to Miss Rashida, she's asking, I'm telling, I'm talking. So then you end up with situations where kids are behaving one way for one set of people and behaving a different way for another set of people. That is also another really good way to identify if you're really dealing with a child that has autism, because kids with autism, from in the beginning, with no intervention, they treat everybody the same. They don't care who you are. They don't care how important you are. They don't care how much money you make. They will treat you the same. Now, our other kiddos, you can tell, like, if somebody else walks in the room, they will straighten it up for you. Kids with autism rarely do that in the beginning. You are literally teaching them how to interact with you. So I have one kiddo now, and it's so frustrating to mom. He does not behave the same way. And we've been going through parent training for about 3 years, but it's hard because as a parent, you are the authority. So sometimes that flexibility is really hard for a parent to get. But I'm like, well, if our therapist has been successful doing this, I really think you'll be successful too. And so then you get into, like, I'm just trying to show you evidence that this works. So to me, it all kind of ends up going back to parent education and making sure that parents are agreeing to what you want to do, so y'all are both on the same page. So when it gets hard, you could be like, remember we said we want to do this? Remember potty training is going to make your life easier? You have to throw that all back at them, because when it gets hard, they will become frustrated, and that's when you get that exhaustion. So if you haven't had those conversations on the front end, it's going to be hard for you. It's going to be hard for you to swing it back and remind them of this is important.
All right. We're going to have to wrap this up.
If you want the bag, this is where you can find it.
We just want to thank you so very much for your presentation. Did we have any questions? We have 2 minutes remaining. If there are any questions for our presenter, please post them now in the chat or raise your hand.
Yes, or you can find me. You can email me if you have other questions. You can email me too. I love talking about this stuff, as you guys can see.
This was very informational, and this is wonderful. We are in the chat. This is wonderful. Thank you very much. And as we said, this is the contact information if you want the bags. Maybe you are a grandparent and you want to make sure that your time with your grandchildren is meaningful. This could be something that you could purchase. If you work with children, this could also be something that's meaningful and purposeful. So yeah, we had another thank you. So we're going to close out with the Al-Fatiha, and once again, thank you all for attending, and we thank our presenter. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim, ghayril maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much.